Right. Sounds good. All right. Well, super excited to be here. Appreciate everybody at Helm and Calvin and the team for having me here. Today, we are going to talk about growth, favorite topic of mine, and hopefully yours as well. Vitally important to every agency and company in general. In particular, we're going to be focusing today on how to land 6- and 7-figure opportunities and grow with confidence. So a little bit of a different spin on things here. So we're talking more enterprise level deals and really how to do so in a predictable way where you can be confident in your growth. So we'll be covering do some introductions, talking about how to establish your right to win audience, how to create offers that prospects can't refuse, how to write engaging messaging, and then, as Calvin mentioned, we'll spend some time for Q&A. So get those questions rolling here. So a little bit of introduction on, first of all, who am I and why am I the person to be talking about this topic in the first place? So obviously, my name is Christian Banach. I am the principal and chief growth officer of a firm very creatively named Christian Banach LLC. And we are a business development and growth consulting firm. We specialize in working with agencies and MarTech companies. And our value prop, what we help them do is help them to land those 6- and 7-figure opportunities predictably. A bit about myself and my background. I has always been a lifelong entrepreneur. I founded a concert promotions business in high school. Would go on to work with artists like Lady Gaga and Pitbull. Along the way, got introduced to experiential marketing, and the business that I had eventually grew into our own events, our own concerts, as well as doing large promotional events for Allstate and Toyota, Disney, and some other big corporate companies. Things were buzzing along very well with that organization for about 15 years for my company. The 2008 recession hits and business starts to dry up. And I was on the verge of maybe going out of business. So like maybe some of you here on the phone, I had grown through word of mouth and referrals and did not have really a great sales strategy, a great sales plan or process. So I went out, I hired a consultant who came in, really taught me the fundamentals of business development. And I loved it. I really gravitated to it, so much so that I decided to pivot my career, closed down my agency, and then went to work, which has now been about 10 years, strictly at agencies in biz dev roles. So I've worked at independent agencies, holding company agencies across all different marketing disciplines. And along the way, really discovered that my superpower is generating those top of the funnel opportunities. And while in our business, the pitch and the close is kind of the sexy part of business development, I really love the hunting portion of it. And without those leads in the first place, it doesn't matter how good you are at pitching and closing. So that's where I decided to focus more of my career, and how it led me to this particular company that I have here now. The pandemic had happened, and I saw agencies that were going out of business, and really reminded me of my business during the Great Recession. The difference here was, rather than me needing to hire a consultant to help me, I felt like I was now that consultant that can give back and help others. So I ended up leaving my agency job and forming this company about 2 years ago, and have really been blessed to work with a lot of really great agencies. So a little bit about me, but I've been able to, close, many, many millions of dollars of business with big companies, and really excited to, again, share and kind of dive into how we go about doing that and why we go about doing that. So with that said, I think it's important to take a step back and see what's actually happening in our industry now. And I'm actually going to launch a poll here. I am curious from everybody that's on the line here. I'm curious which one of these 5 factors has impacted your agency, your business the most. And I'll talk a little bit about this, but if you could, put in the chat, that would be great. But what we're seeing across the different clients that we work with is, number one, we're seeing budget cuts. We are seeing clients coming to us and asking of us to do more with less. And it's certainly made it difficult to provide these types of services and remain and maintain that type of margin that we're all looking for. So that's been a challenge from a biz dev standpoint. We're also seeing more and more creation of in-house agencies. So work that previously was outsourced to vendors and other types of firms are now being brought in-house and handled by the brand or the company themselves, which has now caused a situation where you're not just competing against other agencies, but you're competing against the actual in-house agency of many of these companies. We're also seeing a thinning of the roster, meaning that some of the big companies, the P&Gs, might be working with 100 or more, agencies, and even some of the mid-sized companies are working with maybe a dozen. However, what we're seeing is that there's been a movement that now they're working with less, so they're consolidating that work, which could be a good or a bad thing. If you're the one of the agencies that they're consolidating with, that might mean more work for you. On the other hand, if you're the one that they're kind of pushing out and consolidating with somebody else, it could mean that you're out of a job. We're also seeing more and more project-based work. So we're seeing less big AOR type opportunities and more projects. And even the AOR opportunities that are happening oftentimes the relationship would start with that company with a project at first. So it's really changed the model for a lot of agencies that have been used to just working in an AOR type mentality, and also changes how to go about new business. And then we're also seeing COVID and the recession, obviously. So more on a macro level, COVID's kind of come and gone and come back again, and no one really knows where we're at right now. So it's added a lot of uncertainty, as has the recession, or the looming recession that we have here. Are we in one? Are we not? Brands again are cautious. Some of them are cautious in how they're approaching these next few months and next few years based on these types of factors. So looking at the poll here, we're seeing, I can kind of share this here. So we're looking at, about a third of you seeing budget cuts, about a third project work, and about a third recession. So pretty common. I think I chose this to only be, you can pick one, and I think most of the people that we talk to, there's usually 2 or 3 that have really impacted their business, and sometimes, up to 4 and 5. So I share all of this because we can all agree that the marketing landscape is changing, it's evolving, and probably at a more rapid pace than we've maybe ever seen before. And while most would agree that this is true, what's not changing along with it and evolving for most agencies is how they acquire new business. And I love the Einstein quote of the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. But that's what a lot of agencies are doing. And some of the things that we see a lot of is really an over-reliance on word of mouth and referrals. Maybe that's how they started the business. Maybe they were a freelancer. Maybe they worked at an agency already, decided to, go out and do their own thing. And it really was in the beginning just more of a word of mouth referrals thing. But then they get to a certain point where those word of mouth and referrals start to dry up, or they're not the type of leads and opportunities that they want. And ultimately they need to do something different. We're also seeing, thought leadership. Some agencies are at least doing something in developing thought leadership and whatnot, but they have no distribution strategy for that content. They might be a small agency and they are posting content on their website or their social channels, and kind of praying and hoping that a C-suite executive at a Fortune 500 company stumbles upon their website and that article and wants to then, engage in a conversation. And unfortunately, more times than not, we are not seeing that, work very well. So, so what are they doing to actually get that content in front of the right decision makers? We're also seeing a lot of agencies that have been relying on networking events and conferences for new business, which, in our opinion, is sort of a little bit of an old school type of an approach. There's a time and a place for it, but, I certainly wouldn't recommend that being your only strategy. And obviously with COVID, this has been, very challenging over the last couple of years. And even today, the types of events that are out there and who's attending and all of that is really changed. And, and some of those, some people that we speak with are just kind of trying to think and hope that things go back to how they were. And I don't see it going quite like that back again. And then the fourth thing that we see a lot of is, agencies going out and, hiring what we call a new business director that has a quote unquote magic Rolodex. I'm dating myself here with the term Rolodex a bit, but the guy that supposedly, does, go golfing with the CMO of this company and, went to college, was, frat brothers with, the CEO at another company, and just going to call these individuals up and they're going to give you business. And more times than not, that just does not work. If they do anything, maybe they give you, one opportunity and then they fizzle out really fast, but they're certainly not there building any sort of repeatable system that you can actually have confidence in and knowing that you're going to be able to grow in a predictable way. So with all that said, we're here today to share what we feel and believe and have experienced is a better way forward. And that is through doing outbound prospecting. And our definition of outbound prospecting is the proactive engagement of prospects through strategic cold calling, cold email, and social media to generate a predictable pipeline of opportunities with target companies to grow with confidence. So a lot of words there, but they all mean something. First and foremost, it's proactive, right? We are not sitting back and waiting for a word of mouth opportunity or referral or an inbound lead. We are going after the prospects we want to work with. It's done so very strategically. Sometimes outbound gets a bad rap for mass emails and robocalls. That's not what you're going to see here today. This is done in a very strategic, thoughtful way. But the idea here is to create a predictable pipeline, and we'll share a little bit more about that here in a second. Ultimately, to be able to grow with confidence. And how we do that is really, think about this as a funnel. At the top of the funnel is the number of target accounts or target companies that a firm reaches out to through outbound prospecting. We use the word accounts because we take an account-based marketing or account-based sales approach. So how many companies do I need to reach out to set a qualified meeting? And of the qualified meetings that we set and hold, how many of those turn into a proposal? And then of those proposals or RFPs, how many of those result ultimately in us winning business? And that is the secret sauce here of how you're going to be able to grow with confidence, is knowing these numbers and these metrics. I'm not going to fool you. This is not an overnight thing. This is going to take 6 months to a year to probably start to flush out what some of these numbers mean for your agency and the markets that you're trying to target. But ultimately, you're going to know, hey, I can target 100 companies and it's going to yield this many meetings, which will yield this many opportunities and this number of business wins. And then from there, you can start to scale. If you lose a client, you can just put more at the top of the funnel. And if you are, just overloaded in work, you could pull back on the top of the funnel. But that's the idea of how you're going to be able to grow with confidence, is by this type of funnel-based approach and knowing these metrics. Now, with that said, there's 3 keys to be able to land those opportunities in the first place. We know we can fill the top of the funnel, but what are we actually going to do to actually get these folks to want to meet with us? And that's what we're going to spend the bulk of the time here today as on the 3 keys. If there's going to be anything that you do, these are those 3 keys. We're going to talk more on the strategy side. We can certainly spend time on how to write the best cold email and how to handle things on a cold call and tech tools. But I'm talking more on a strategic level. I want to spend time here today. So with that said, this is something that we preach all the time, and we call it the 40-40-20 rule. And basically, it is 40% of your success in outbound prospecting is going to come from the list, 40% is going to come from your offer, and 20% is going to come from your message. And we're going to unpack each one of these 3 as they're related to the key. But think about your list as these are the companies and the prospects that I'm reaching out to. Think of the offer as this is what I'm going to provide the prospect in order for them to want to meet with me. So what offer are you making? And then the third is the message. So what is the message, the email, the cold call script? What are we actually going to say to these prospects in order to get them to want to meet with us? So the first here, again, is around the list. So how do we establish your right to win audience list? And when we talk about a right to win audience, I want to spend a couple minutes on that. So to us, a right to win audience is a segment of the market where your firm has a better than average chance of success at winning business. And we do not I think there's others out there that say, hey, put together your dream client list and then go after them. And, that's not really what we prescribe here. I think you can spend a lot of time chasing companies that would never probably do business with you, or it's a really big long shot. When I've asked these questions of agencies, I oftentimes get Google and Nike and Tesla and, some of these world's most beloved brands. And while I would love to do business with them as well, those are maybe more of a like to win or a want to win than they are really a right to win. Now, again, I don't know everybody who's on the phone here, but I can say even some of the biggest agencies that we work with, they have certain categories or certain companies that are out of their reach as well for various reasons. So the idea here is that you want to be realistic in who you target, because you want to be able to get meetings and you want those meetings to convert. And if you're targeting the wrong prospects, it's going to be a long, road ahead for you with, poor results. Now, I'm not saying you don't have some stretch companies on there. That's okay. But there's a difference between stretching this much and stretching this much. So again, right to an audience is a key term that you should be thinking about when you're starting to build out your list. So what do you do actually then to find your right to an audience? And there's really two big keys here, is your ideal company profile and your buyer persona. And we'll talk a little bit about each of these. So ideal company profile, probably familiar with this. You, depending on your type of agency, you might be doing this type of work even for your clients. But what we find oftentimes is agencies have sort of the cobbler's kids have no shoes syndrome, where they're great at marketing and sales for their clients, but they don't take the time to do it for themselves. They're too busy running around, handling client work. So part of all of this is sitting down. That's why I like to spend a lot of time on a strategy, because we are firm believers in, measuring twice and cutting once. So with that, one of the first steps is identifying your ideal company profile. So you'll see here, there's a number of different categories that you could fill in from, the industry. Where do you have industry experience? And what we recommend doing is doing an audit of all of your clients that you've had over the last several years, looking maybe internally also to your team members, where maybe they have experience outside of your agency. What are some of the industries or categories that they have experience in? But the idea here is that, again, we want a right to win. So if you have experience in consumer packaged goods, that's a great industry. There's a lot of growth opportunities within that industry. But it would be a big leap to go into automotive if you've never worked in anything having to do with automotive. So let's first start with what we know, and then we can also start thinking about, all right, what are some adjacent categories that are similar to what we've already have some experience with, but maybe not direct experience with. So we want at least there to be a story to tell. So industry is an important one. You're going to want to look at geography. So if you're based in the West Coast, you may not have you may have a tougher time winning business with companies on the East Coast because of time zones, because of travel expenses, things of that nature. Maybe yes, maybe no. I think that's changed a little bit with COVID. But again, the idea here is we're going to try to find the sweet spot. Not that we would not target someone on the other side, but we want to find who are those real bullseyes for us. Then you're going to want to look at company size. You could look at things like, what are the revenue of these organizations we've typically worked with? What are the geographies? What are the employee counts that these individuals have had? Maybe development stage. Are you typically an agency that works with startups? Are you an agency that typically works with, mature companies, hyper growth, maybe companies that are on the decline and need to be reinvigorated? So that's a good one to look at. Marketing maturity level. So when this particular client came to you, what was their level of maturity? Were these really novices in whatever discipline of marketing you have, or were they super advanced? And that could be good to know as well, because if you're working with, companies that are super advanced in something, then you're not going to want to go and prospect against companies that are beginner or novice level, and vice versa. Target customers. Do you have an expertise, a point of view on how to reach Gen Z, millennials, boomers, African Americans? So think through that. And again, not all of these may fit for you, but that's another something to think about here, is the target customers of the companies you're prospecting, right? You're going to want to look at pivotal problems. So when companies do come to you, what is their typical problem that they're trying to solve? A problem is not, hey, we need a website built. A website is a solution to a problem. That problem might be we need more leads, or our sales are down. So what are the problems that typically people come to you to solve? Similarly, what kind of business objectives do they have? And then I have another area to sort of notable attributes. So some other things that maybe don't fit in any of these other boxes, but might be worth noting. They were recently funded, might be something that you might want to mention if that happens to be the case. So again, the idea here is you're going to do an audit of your existing clients that you've had, also your team, and you're going to start to build out this profile, and you'll start to find the commonalities between everybody here. Give you a little bit of an example. So this is one from one of our clients. So this particular client had a great experience with their beer, wine, and spirits brands. They actually had offices on both coasts, and they actually felt that they did not have a right to win more in the Midwest, but they did on the coast. They were generally working with $1 billion or more companies that were in a growth and mature state. The marketing maturity level of those organizations were very mature and advanced. And this particular client, due to their parent company, had some really interesting insights and research that had been done around Gen Z and youth that they felt would be a compelling reason. So looking at then companies that were maybe also trying to target Gen Z and youth. So again, that's the first step here on a company level to start understanding the profile of the companies that you want to reach out to. What you're going to then need to do next is understand within those companies, who should we be reaching out to? So buyer personas. So what are the common job titles that we're typically interfacing? So we have, again, this form that we work with our clients on that has a lot of the titles that we typically come against. What I recommend here is very similar. You look at your past clients, you look at pitches maybe that you've been involved in, you look at inbound leads that you've received, and try to find what are the common job titles of people that that have reached out to or we've interfaced with. And that is a great place to start for identifying who you should be reaching out to for your services. Similarly, title rank. Are you talking only to C-suite? Are you talking with, manager, maybe coordinator level? It could range, but again, the best place to go is to look internally at what you've done in the past. Experience level is another one we looked at. How long have they been in the market? Any sort of geography, and then maybe any sort of keywords. By keywords meaning, if you look these people up on LinkedIn, where do they fall? What are some of the descriptions that they might have that would indicate this is a good prospect, so a good keyword, or a bad prospect for us, negative keyword. Again, you can see another example of how we do it. So we, highlighted in green, these are titles that we always want to go after. If it's in yellow, it's kind of a case-by-case basis. Same thing for title rank, experience, and geography. So now you have a picture of the companies, you have a picture of the actual individuals within those companies you should be targeting. But how do you find these prospects now? We have the profile, but what do you do? So my impression here is that probably most on here on this webinar are not doing cold outbound right now, or they're just kind of dipping their toes in the water, because there's certainly expensive tools, and we have them here at our firm that we use. But that doesn't mean that you need to go out and buy a $30,000 subscription to a data provider. You can get a lot done very cheaply, and that's what I'm going to explain here. So two of the resources I'm going to share, LinkedIn. I'm sure we all have LinkedIn right now. You may want to upgrade to Sales Navigator. It's going to give you a few more capabilities. But essentially what you can do is to build out your company list. You would just take that buyer persona or that ideal company profile. You would plug it into the filters in your search in LinkedIn, and it's going to come back to you with a list of companies. You could then look through those list of companies and identify which ones make sense for you and which ones don't. You could start to prioritize. You might get a long list of 100 or more. How do we prioritize these based on some of the different data points? But ultimately, you'll have a list then of companies that fit that ideal company profile. You could then take that information and take it a step further and now plug in all those job titles that we went over into buyer personas. So now you're going to be specifically looking for certain titles and experience levels within the organizations now that you've already identified. So once you have that, you can save these searches in LinkedIn, and you can turn to tools like Hunter that I have highlighted here, which is a tool that basically it's like a plugin that works with LinkedIn that you could essentially go in, and once you're on someone's profile, it'll export their contact data, and you'll have their phone numbers and their emails and all of that type of information. There's a lot of tools that do it that range in price, from free, like Hunter gives you some free credits. You might not be able to do it at scale, on up to others like Seamless that we use also. That's maybe only like $100 a month. So relatively speaking, fairly inexpensive. But this is how you're going to get all your data now. So you've got your profile, you've got your persona, and this is how you're actually going to get the data so you can actually start sending emails out to these folks. So that's the first key, is really zeroing in on the list. The second here is making an offer your prospect can't refuse. We got our prospects now, but what are we going to say to them that's going to incentivize them to want to meet with us? So we call this an offer. And our definition of that, it's a proposition made to a prospect to cut through and incentivize a desired action. In this case, the desired action is going to be to meet with you. That's what you ultimately want, right? You want to get that meeting. You want to get your foot in the door to have a conversation. it may seem common knowledge, but when you're talking 6 and 7 figure deals, you are not going to get a one call close. Let's just get that out on the table right now. You got to think about this as building a relationship with somebody. And just like you would build a relationship with anybody, you start small, and then you work that relationship, over a period of time. So we believe one of the best ways to do that is through making an offer. And we'll talk about that here a little bit more. So a little bit, what's happening out there? Why do we need to make an offer? Well, we think about outbound, you think about email as a channel to reach out. Well, sales and marketing automation tools are flooding the market right now. The costs have gone way down. The accessibility of them have gone way up. So our prospects are getting more and more email than ever before, making it harder to cut through. When we think about phone, that's another channel for outbound. Companies are cutting their office desktop phones. Companies are cutting voicemail. And then obviously we live in this remote world now. Many people are not even going into the office. So it's more hard than ever to try to connect by phone with somebody. And then the third channel people think about with outbound is LinkedIn. And, we talked about LinkedIn before. I'm sure everybody here has a LinkedIn profile. The executives that we're reaching out to have LinkedIn profiles, but that doesn't mean they're active on LinkedIn and using it as a communication channel. And we find out with enterprise deals that most of these folks, again, they have a profile, but they're not posting. They're not actively on it. It's more so a resume that they put up on the web. So I think even LinkedIn says something like only 1% of all their users are actually posting content on a regular basis. So the net of all of this is that it's harder than ever to connect with prospects. It doesn't mean that outbound doesn't work. It just means you got to be more strategic about how you go about doing that. So when we talk about an offer and being strategic in what we reach out to, we are firm believers in not just reaching out and saying, hey, Coca-Cola, we'd love to get 15 minutes on your calendar so we could run through our capabilities and tell you how great we are. There's no value in it for them. We already know that these prospects are getting hit up every which way from all different types of agencies and other types of firms. So we need something that's going to cut through. So we work with our clients and we advise you to start thinking about, what is your innovative approach to solving a client's problem? Do you have a highly interesting insight, fresh thinking, a unique perspective on something, a proprietary method or tool, a new idea or concept? But the idea here is that your message to them, this is email or phone, is going to be not get that 15 minutes on your calendar. It's going to be, hey, we've been looking into your business, Coca-Cola. We think you might be experiencing this types of problems. And we have a really interesting and different perspective on how to solve it. And we'd like to get to know you. So we'd be willing to do a 1-hour workshop or an inspiration session or do a free audit, something along those lines, right? Just as a way to get to know each other. There's no cost or anything for that. So this is where you can start to see the offer that we're making. We're giving them something of value before we're asking for something back, right? So you got to be thinking about what's in it for them. 15 minutes capabilities presentation, nothing in it for them. Now, learning a unique perspective on something, there is something in it for them. Now, why do we see this as a benefit on this type of an approach? Number one, it's going to cut through a lot better than that 15-minute check-in call. Secondarily, it positions you as experts, right? You are now talking to them about a problem and you have a solution to that problem that's unique and different. So the dynamic of this conversation is very different. It's not a sales call. It is not a creds call. You are not trying to pitch them anything. You are here to share insights with them, which is a very different dynamic to a conversation. So you're in a position of authority now versus a subservient kind of salesperson type of call. The third thing is these types of workshops, inspiration sessions, insights meetings, whatever you want to call it, it becomes now a platform to discuss client challenges. It's not a platform for me to pitch you my services. It's a platform to unpack an issue, a problem, and have a conversation around it. And because of that, we see it leading to next steps a lot better. And the last thing, it starts the relationship off with reciprocity. You have now given them something, so psychologically, they feel compelled to give something back to you. That may not be in the form of a business. They're not going to just give you business for sure, but they certainly might be more willing to do introductions or be more forthcoming in their situations. So all of this is just going to help you in the long run. Give you a little bit of an example here is, this is something that we've done. So you'll think about what is the problem, the pivotal problem that maybe the industry is experiencing or your target audience is experiencing. In this case, it was about, restaurant revenue fluctuating because of the pandemic and kind of an over-reliance on DoorDashes and Grubhubs of the world, these third parties. And this particular client of ours had 3 really interesting insights on how they could take better control of their customer experience and stop relying on those third parties. So they had these 3 big ideas that they were going to share. And those 3 big ideas were actually rooted in work that they had already done for Dunkin' and Panera and Cava. So you can start to see how this would come to life. Again, rather than reaching out to McDonald's and saying, we'd love to just get on your calendar, we're saying, hey, we know that your margins are being eaten up by these third parties. We got 3 big ideas. They're A, B, and C, and it's based on work with Dunkin', Panera, and Cava. Totally different dynamic than that 15 minutes. So this, again, is something to start thinking about, is what insights can you share and how do you package that into some sort of, more of a workshop-y type of engagement versus a 15-minute get to know you call. So that's the second key. The third key now is we need to put this all together into messaging, and messaging that converts. So our definition of engaging messaging, it consists of the email templates and call scripts that trigger a desired response, right? So it's not just any messaging, it's got to be engaging to cut through here. And there's really 7 principles that we try to follow with every email or phone call that we make. And we'll talk briefly about each of these, but is it pivotal problem focused? Is it personalized? Is it relevant? Does it offer value? Is it short and casual? Does it build trust? And does it compel action? So the first is pivotal problem focus. So you can start to see maybe a theme here, but we really want to make sure that we are targeting companies and we are poking at a problem or a challenge that we think that they're experiencing. And ideally, it's a problem or a challenge that we feel is urgent and important for them to solve. So we want to go at them with something like, again, the restaurant revenue example. That's something that's top of mind. That's something that's keeping these folks up at night right now. We want to get a reaction when we send an email like, wow, this is exactly what we were talking about in last week's meeting, or this is what's keeping me up at night, right now. So we've got this pivotal problem matrix that we have here, and we really want to focus up on the upper right quadrant, those urgent and important problems. If we can't always get the urgency behind it, it's not always possible, depending on your type of agency and your work. At least make sure that it maybe not be urgent to solve, but it's still very important for them to solve, right? And that's what we want to do at outbound, because we are interrupting them. They're not coming to us asking to solve something. We're going after them. And we definitely want to stay away from things that aren't urgent or that are urgent but not important, and stay away from things that are not urgent and not important. So think again, is this problem that we can solve urgent and important? Secondarily, is it personalized? Every email that we send out at our company is personalized to the company or even the prospect. So we're researching Coke, Pepsi, whatever, and each one of them are getting a slightly different version of the email. Now I say slightly because you don't have to write something totally bespoke. You can see here, this is a chart from SalesLoft, which is an automation tool for sales, that when you personalize the message, you could see without personalization, it's about a 3% reply rate. When you personalize, it goes up to 7%. Now that said, this graph also shows that once you reach about 20% of the message being personalized, it really starts to level off. So this is a great insight that you don't have to write a totally bespoke email. You can write kind of a general template and just personalize it 20% to the individual prospect. And we believe really in, if you're going to personalize, do it in the first sentence so they see it instantly that this is meant for them. Third principle is you want to be relevant, right? We already talked about making it urgent and important, but was there a key decision maker hired? Maybe a new CMO was brought in. Was there a recent merger acquisition? Did they announce some increases or decreases in marketing investments or funding rounds? Other news stories that are happening. So try to time your messaging around things like this that are happening, because this is going to be more top of mind and more relevant for them. Fourth, we talked about offering value. So again, make sure that this comes across in your email that you send, whatever you've landed at, your unique perspective, your different point of view, make sure that that comes across in the email, that this is what we're trying to do. We're not just trying to get that 15 minutes, right? We are trying to share some insights with you. Fifth, you got to be short and casual. Emails under 100 words, writing at an 8th grade level or below. Now it's difficult to personalize, be relevant, say your offer, all of that in under 100 words. There's an art and a science to it. But the bottom line is, there's data that backs this up, that the longer the email, the less likelihood of the response rate. You got to think about the fact that these executives are busy. They're likely reading this on their phone. So they're running from meeting to meeting. And if it's too long, they're not going to read it. And same thing, you want to keep it casual. Like I said, 8th grade level or below. This is not the time to write a college thesis paper and be super jargony. Again, they're not going to read it. You want to write like you would very casually to a friend or through a text message or a tweet. 6th is your message needs to build trust. So you want to demonstrate empathy, maybe share relevant client names, notable business results, show some familiarity. If you're maybe based in the same town as them, mention things like that. So you want to build trust with your message as well. And then lastly is you have to compel action. You can do all of this, but it doesn't, if you're not asking for anything at the end, if you're not, pushing them towards something, what's the point? So this is interesting insights from Gong, which is a sales intelligence platform that talks about having a specific CTA, which would be maybe like, hey, do you have time next Tuesday at 10 p.m. to meet or 10 a.m. to meet? Very specific, right? Open-ended might be, do you have time over the next 2 weeks to meet? So you can see those are about the same. And then there's this third one, interest-based CTAs, which is double the response rate when you use those. And that's more so saying, hey, is this of interest to you? And the idea here is that you want to sell the conversation, not the meeting, especially with enterprise, right? These folks are busy. To send a message to a C-suite executive and say, are you busy? Or, can we meet next Thursday at 10 o'clock? It's almost tone deaf and understanding their schedule and their world. So, we strongly believe in more so doing ask for interest. If they're interested, then you can start following up with some more information and try to lock in, a day at a time. So I have a little bit of an example here that I'll, go through quickly. In how this comes to life. So this is the message itself that was kind of written, and it may not seem like it right now, but every one of these words means something and tracks back to those 7 principles that I mentioned. So you can see here, in kind of the orangish color, the pivotal problem, where we're really zeroing in on, in this particular example, holiday sales, concern around holiday sales, middle income consumers anxious about the pandemic and recession. So that is really the problem that we're trying to poke at in this particular example. We have personalized the message. So you can see again, that first line is about saw your commentary and retail drive about declining sales. So we're personalizing it specifically to that prospect and something that we read about them. It's very relevant. This particular email was sent to gift-focused retailers. So we mentioned that. Gift-focused retailers are worried about holiday sales, pandemic, so it's very relevant to them right now. We talked about offering value. So we have in the green there, we have about unlocking certain insights, how to drive consumers to treat themselves and others with special gifts. So that's what you're going to learn from this session. So we called it out specifically right here. Building trust. We mentioned some client names. This particular client of ours worked with K Jewelers and Yankee Candle and Edible Arrangements. So if I'm a gift-focused retail and I receive this and I see that this agency worked with those types of companies, I'm going to feel more comfortable about meeting with them potentially. And then compels action, right? We have the purple at the bottom or the pink, and okay if I send more information. So it's more of an interest-based thing. Yeah, and the response we're looking for is, yeah, send some more information. Sounds interesting, yes. And then at that point, we pick it up from there. So everybody's going to get believe they're going to have a copy of this, so you can sort of see the original, and then we can see how this all comes to life. But when you're writing your messaging, I highly advise you to go through these 7 steps and do the same type of exercise and make sure you have all 7 of those boxes checked off. So that concludes the presentation here. We have again the 3 keys to landing 6- and 7-figure opportunities and growing with confidence really revolves around this 40-40-20 rule. First is you're establishing your right to an audience. The second is you're going to create those offers that prospects can't refuse. And then the third is you're going to put this all together and you're going to write engaging messaging that converts. All right. So Kelvin, do we have any questions? I know we have about 10 minutes left.
I think if people want to throw any questions in the chat, that would be great. They had some questions around the chat feature not working earlier on, but those have been cleared out. So
got it.
Agnes is asking, can we access the PowerPoint presentation that you've just presented here?
I will be providing it as long as Helm is able to provide it to everybody. But yes, I'll make this available.
Perfect. And I'm sure we can make that work on our end too. So when we send out the video recordings of all of this, we can send that out as well.
Great.
Does anybody else have any other questions? No. I would like to thank you for contributing today. There was a ton of really great information in there. A lot of good value, I think, in terms of how people can help grow and scale their firms from the sales and marketing standpoint. I thought it was really quite interesting. So I hope everybody else thought the same. If you did, please give Christian a big shout out here on the chat. Give him a big thank you, because he was kind enough to take time out of his day to participate in this, and I'm thankful for it. So thank you very much, Christian.
Yeah, great. I will share if anybody, I know it's a lot of information to kind of dive in and take through, and hopefully we'll be able to provide the deck. If anybody wants to dive in further, can certainly visit us on the web, christianbanach.com. We have a masterclass that goes through this even further, newsletter that we put out that also provides some tips. So, and feel free to engage with me as well. Happy to answer any questions one-to-one if you'd like. Yeah,
for sure. Adrian had actually a question she just threw up into chat. What other channels should we consider outside of email?
Yeah, great question. So email is probably, your number one without knowing what market you're serving. Phone is actually still a very good channel. I know I get the pushback all the time is cold calling dead? Cold calling is dead. And I say that, emphatically no. At least a third of the meetings that we're setting for our clients are coming directly from the phone. And I also believe that, that there's influence that the phone is making on others that end up converting via email. So definitely email, phone. I would experiment with LinkedIn. As I shared earlier, a lot of times we're not seeing great engagement from prospects on LinkedIn. However, if you think of LinkedIn more on a long-term game and more about building relationships rather than just kind of directly booking meetings, I think you could have some success with LinkedIn as well.
Great. Danielle's got another question. Are there any new ways of networking you've seen pop up over the pandemic?
New ways of networking over the pandemic. I don't know if it's just related to the pandemic, but video has become a new channel that a lot are experimenting with. So it's still delivering it via email, but you can record like on platforms like Loom or Vidyard, a quick, minute, 2-3 minute, video, and more so just explain yourself there. And you can embed, an image of the video and people can click on it right there. But I know some that are having success using that as a channel. It's just a little bit more personal than a cold email. So I think that's definitely an area to explore as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Have you ever seen the tool Descript?
Descript, I've not.
It rung a bell for me. It's like Loom, but it's got AI and it learns your voice pattern. So then it writes everything out for you in a paragraph, and you can retype whatever you forgot to say or want to say, and it will speak as you.
Oh, wow. That sounds interesting.
Pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Anyways, there's another question from Karen. What about direct mail as an additional way to impact prospects?
Yeah, direct mail. I think we've seen clients have success with this as well. I can't say that we've done much since the pandemic. I would be concerned about who's working remotely, who's not working remotely, and are they even going to see it? So that's one just factor to consider. I think those that have seen success though with direct mail, I think of it more as like a 3D mailer. So it's not just a letter that you're sending to somebody, but more of a package that you put together. Something, we're agencies, right? Come up with something creative that reflects back to your offer and who your agency is. I think there could be some success with that. And maybe you're not sending it out to everybody, but maybe it's just really the tier one prospects at those tier one companies. But I do think it's something that you can explore with, and it's another good channel. And it gives you also reason to follow up by phone and say, hey, I sent you this package, just want to make sure you got it. So it gives you kind of a natural way to engage in a further conversation.
Yeah, that's great. We've got another question in chat here. How can we get our marketing and creative people to think more direct than they are used to in helping us with campaigns that are more sales related? Marketers usually squirm with anything too salesy.
Yeah, good question. To be honest with you, we don't in terms of like writing the copy, if we're talking a little bit about that, I would actually advise, not to have your marketing creative team handling the copy when you're doing more outbound sales. It tends to then take the form of being too marketing-y, if that's a word. You want these emails to come across as like you literally wrote them one-to-one. This is not the place, what we're talking about here today is not the place to have like a blog article that's sent out or anything like that. So I think, keep that in mind. Number one is that is the mindset. This is a sales initiative. It's not a marketing initiative. Now, I do like engaging, the creative team and others to kind of help come up with these big ideas for the offers. I think they can add a whole lot of value in that portion of it. But when it comes to actually crafting the communications, I actually honestly prefer that they're not involved.
I think that's a great point. I've read it in a few different books and heard it from a few different people that it's really good to separate the marketing function from the sales function, just because they can be quite different.
Yeah.
If there's any more questions, everybody keep them coming. We've got a couple more minutes before we kind of have to move on.
Back to the question about other creative ideas that came out of the pandemic. One thing that comes to mind is that we did quite successfully with the client is we actually organized a virtual wine tasting. So what we did is we identified top level CIOs and CMOs at organizations that we wanted to work with, and we sent them. We actually organized kind of like a webinar, if you will. So we brought in a guest speaker, we brought in a sommelier from a winery, and those that agreed to the meeting, we brought together basically 15 different C-suite executives. The first part of that engagement was a virtual wine tasting where they took us kind of through, got everybody, feeling good. And then the last half of the meeting was really unpacking a certain topic and facilitating some networking between the different executives. It was a little costly, as you can imagine, sending out wine and everything to everybody. However, it was also very much worth it because it definitely cut through, and it was different than just your typical kind of cold email type of an approach. So think, virtual, gatherings, things like that. We're working on another client to do a CMO dinner series that's going to be in person, but it's all driven through an outbound approach, though.
Awesome. Well, I think we'll cut you short there. Again, really great content here, tons of value. I hope everybody else saw what I did there. So again, thank you. If everybody else could give Christian a big thanks, that would be amazing. We've got Marcel coming up here in 10 minutes, and he will be talking about KPIs and how to measure your performance in your agency. So hope to see everybody there.